It is episode number 3 of You Matter IL because you matter. I am Mo from 97.7 QLZ and from the American Foundation of Suicide Prevention. She is the head of the Illinois chapter.
I'm the associate director for the Illinois
Associate
chapter.
director.
Yep,
I never
absolutely.
get the title right.
Okay.
I liked Queen. I liked Queen from that first week. Angela Cummings, how are you today?
I'm great. I also kind of like that title. We'll have to sort of discuss that offline, maybe a bit more, coming up with an appropriate title for these podcasts. I am great, and I'm happy to be here again. And this is our third episode of this series, and I'm just getting more and more excited about how people are tuning in and really engaging and interacting with us. So very, very happy to be here for this important topic.
Very much so. Each week has a different theme and a different purpose. And if you are watching us live, we love your interaction. We love your questions. We generally try to keep per topic, on topic each week. But if you do have questions, please feel free to reach out and ask. We love you for doing so. Thank you to the Villas Senior Care Community for supporting this week's episode. Very appropriate because the world has been crazy over the last year at the least, and a lot of us haven't known how to handle so much of what's going on, and a lot of us also, we don't know how to act if we can't see family, and that includes our aging loved ones. And depression can set in for the senior community, and to help us discuss this is a health professional. Carla, welcome to the show.
I'm glad to be here.
So Carla is a former board member of ours for AFSP Illinois. And when she was on our board, she served as our board president because, as you noted, she is a mental health professional. So we're very happy to have her. This is also just an area that, she shared with me during our time together on the AFSP Illinois board, that this is just, she's very passionate about it. And she has some recent experience herself, caring for her aging parents. So I just thought she would be a great guest. It is an area of passion for her, and she's just a lovely person, and I'm happy to see her again.
Oh, thank you. It's a great topic. Important.
It is very important. And I think generally mental health, depression, anxiety can hit anybody of any age. But I think it's easy to reflect on yourself, look in the mirror and think, okay, well, my age group is upset, that we forget that there are individuals that are in nursing homes right now that aren't having any physical, friendships right now, any conversations. What does that do to a person, Carla?
Well, when you're living in those kind of communities, those congregate communities, as they say, it's very hard. People that might normally be very interactive and happy do get a little depressed, and I think some people as they age might get some cognitive decline, and if they were able to be more social, that wouldn't happen as quickly. But now, because of the lack of interaction, a lot of interaction with other people, that's even more disorienting for some people, and you can see more memory impairment and confusion than they would have otherwise have had without the COVID, even regardless of depression and anxiety. Even just orientation to time, it could be all messed up because of so much isolation, and the days that are the same and the same and the same if you're living in a nursing home or assisted living or in things like that. So it's really a challenge.
We know that elderly populations already have a higher rate of suicide than just the general population anyway. And we also know just from what data has shown us that they are more likely to die when they make an attempt, for various reasons, either because they're just older and have underlying health conditions that make it harder for them to survive a traumatic physical event like a suicide attempt.
Yeah.
And they also, the data is showing us that they tend to have access to more lethal means. So So I think, we're already dealing with a population that had an elevated suicide risk anyway. And, now that they've been really more isolated than usual, even those that aren't even in care facilities, for example, I mean, you see pictures all over, Facebook and Twitter of, families visiting their, grandparents, and they're like waving through windows and holding up signs. So I really think that, it's important to talk about this, because if we're lucky enough to have elderly people still in our lives, family members, we want to be sure that we're really taking some extra time. They're already at an elevated risk, and then you just compound it with those extra feelings of isolation that have come from not, like you said, being able to physically connect with their loved ones, or even their friends, like Carla was saying, things like, the bridge game that used to happen at 5 o'clock. That's been, shut down, and they've been largely confined to their rooms, taking their meals in their rooms. Even just the socialization that happened at the care facilities, for example, has been really reduced. Hopefully we're coming out of that. But the thing about that type of depression is just because they may not just automatically like wake up on Tuesday and be like, great, I can go to the cafeteria and all this built up depression is now just like dissipating. It may be sort of this longer term thing that they're going to need some help digging their way out of, actually. And I will say, just as a note, this is a very personal topic to me. My grandfather died by suicide over 20 years ago. So this is very, very important topic for me. And, like a lot of the people who are, viewing this podcast now may say, or have said, if they've unfortunately had a suicide loss in their own life, we didn't know. We had no idea. We were completely shocked. We didn't think that he was showing any signs of depression. He was still going to dinner every evening with another set of relatives. So like a lot of people will say this after a suicide loss, we didn't see any signs. And it can be even harder, I think, to spot those signs in an elderly population. They're already a little bit more closed in and maybe not reaching out as much as they used to. But you may have more.
I think that older generation, they're just very prone to not even wanting to admit that they're sad. Even sad, the word sad, not depressed. They might have come through the depression if they're, in their 90s, 80s, or they might have lived through World War II with all the rationing. So they almost feel like they don't have the right to complain, or they don't want to be a burden. So relying on their self-report might not be good. I mean, if you phone your family member and ask them how they're doing, unless they, they chronically complain about their aches and pains, they're probably going to say, I'm fine. But don't even, I'm not calling them a liar, but I'm just saying, don't take their word for it. I think it's up to people from the outside, their families, children, grandchildren, whatever, to reach out and do some things other than giving them a litany of questions. Did you eat? Did you sleep? Did you take a bath? All that stuff. Beyond that, to have some things that would enrich their thinking and almost get their minds off of not how they feel, but get them more engaged in something other than how they do feel, because they're with themselves all day long. And I do have some sort of silly, not silly, but practical suggestions that aren't really clinical, but I used some of these, not in my own family, but I had a friend who had a father who was very debilitated. He was in the hospital for such a long time, and he was getting depressed, even though she visited him in the room, in his hospital room. And she put out a request on Facebook once. Can anybody send my father a card to the hospital room? And she, okay. So this is what I did. Is, well, I can do more than send one card. I just went to a bargain bookstore and got a little note cards. And through the internet, we have a lot of access to a lot of things. So I sent him a quote a day, like a famous quote from, not inspiration, jokes, like, and with the with the comedian's name, and sent one to him every single day. So the thought occurs to me, you could do something like that You could even have your kids and grandchildren send your older folks something. To get mail is different these days. Nobody sends mail, but if you can invest in some little note cards and make sure that person gets something every single day, that would be cool. And if the person's able to, you could send them a little packet of note cards you stamp. They can send out mail themselves like that.
That's a good
just
idea.
something. Yeah, I mean, it's easy to do, but some people like RJ, even me, I don't get mail except
I know.
unless it's Bill and junk mail. But I think if you get a personally addressed card from your grandchild or your niece or nephew, or maybe even pass back and forth a crossword puzzle. I'm going to do half of this. You do half of this, and send it back to me, and we'll, little by little, we might be able to figure it out, stuff like that.
Mm-hmm. And I like, Carla, that you're highlighting things that are not technologically dependent, because I feel like sometimes older people, it's like, well, I could email, my grandfather and he wouldn't know what to do with it. So it's like really he's taking it back to these really like just very simple, real world, tangible things that, when they don't feel, they do anything you can do to help them to feel more connected is good. And I feel like as technology advances, they're feeling more and more disconnected, maybe as we're relying more and more on technology. I mean, even for this, for example, right? And everything for the last year. So,
and I think we should always remember, I had to remind myself of this with my mother. I would have loved to have purchased her a computer or stuff like that. She didn't care to use it, and so it's not about, it's about like, so she liked cards, she liked phone calls, and so and she liked Wheel of Fortune. And so I know when my father was in a nursing home for an extended length of time, we used to watch Cash Cab, because whatever was going on, he could blurt out the answer, and he was right a lot of the time. So even if you have sort of like an appointment with your person that's living in a place, and if they like Wheel of Fortune, make it your business or get somebody else in the family. On Wednesdays, we're tune your TV in. I'll watch Wheel of Fortune. You'll watch Wheel of Fortune, and we'll talk back and forth as it's happening. Just stuff like that. Stuff that they already know how to do and value and like. And it wouldn't be all put off by watching it on Zoom or on StreamYard or something.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. There's something that can cause them more stress trying to figure out how to like get their phone to
that's true.
That's true.
So anything that they can do regularly, not just, I think frequency is good. A call once a week is not going to be that impactful. So maybe you have to engage your extended family to do this. If you're like the sole caretaker, that would be a lot maybe. But to get your brother, your sister, your cousins, whatever, the grandkids, to get on sort of like a schedule, that would be nice.
I love this. I like the mentions that, sometimes you have to break out of your generational comfort. For me, I'm a texter. I'm not big on phone calls. I do love the text, but there are generations before me that did not grow up with any of this. And so we need to remind ourselves to help our loved ones that we need to escape our comfort zone from time to time. And you're talking about the weekly call may not help. Well, let me ask you this. If your loved one is just saying, I'm fine, or I'm just tired, or whatever the excuse is.
Yeah.
What are there signs? Like, what are the signs that we can watch out for so we know maybe we do need to step up and call more often? Like, is there anything that we can look for?
Well, maybe some of the signs are subtle, but, it's almost even like pay attention to the way they speak, and do they speak in a happy way or an animated way? If that's, you have to be aware of, if they were always pretty flatline when they spoke anyway, that's not going to be a sign. But if they have less enthusiasm, or if they want to not talk to you so much, like after 40 seconds maybe, and they offer no complaints, or if you just notice they don't have anything to talk about, because that's the paucity of thought. If they don't have any like intrinsic ability or ideas to, get them going, and they don't want to admit that they if somebody's really in trouble, for the most part, generally nobody wants to admit they're so depressed, and they definitely won't admit that they are thinking of hurting themselves, or taking too many pills. They generally won't say that because they don't want to let you down. They'll just do it. So you've got to be, try to, be aware of what they're doing or not doing.
I've heard also, when they really talk about being a burden, and that seems to be like a common theme about how I'm just a burden. Don't worry about me. They're starting to, you ask them, did you get enough to eat? It doesn't really matter. Things like that. Are you in pain? How's your pain threshold? It doesn't really matter. They're starting to not really see themselves in the future tense, maybe. So they don't, it's not worth the bother to be a burden, to ask the doctor for a different prescription here, because it doesn't matter. I don't matter. Those kinds of things. And of course, that being a burden, you have your own life. Don't worry about coming to see me. Those types of things are all, I think, signs that they're starting to check out, that they're starting to see themselves as not, a part of that family unit anymore. They're kind of starting to go down that path, maybe psychologically.
Good point. Yeah.
So I just think that definitely all of that talk about, not being a burden, and then sort of rejecting any kind of offer of help too, because they're going to reject that offer if they don't see themselves as worthy of helping. Like what does it matter? I'm so old. I'll be dead soon anyway. I mean, these are all things, unfortunately, that we've probably heard. And I mean, I think as Carla said, it is part of growing older in a way, to start to feel like you don't want to be a burden. I hear this from my in-laws. Don't worry about us. It's like, well, no, but we do, see, because we love you. So we are going to, so it is kind of a way of disengaging, I think, when they're trying to push you away a little bit.
And I think the thought, it occurs to me that I've done, I think I purposely, especially professionally, have always done a lot of telling people when I talk to them that I enjoy speaking with you. I want to hear more. And especially for an older person that's on their own, sort of by themselves, ask them things that will get them to reminisce about, well, it bothers me. I still want to hear from you. I like the stories. Why don't you tell me again how you met my father? Tell me again, who taught you to drive? Or, or what was it like? Did you have to use rationing for butter? How did you guys make bread and cake? When, these stories, and always say, if you can get them to engage in conversation like that, how important it was to hear that. And, I hope that maybe next week you can tell the same thing to Sally, your granddaughter, or, stuff like that. So without saying, we don't want you to get depressed. We can get you help. That they still need to be here because you just like to hear from them, regardless of how old they are, So it's not so, it doesn't seem as life and death, but it's like, I'm still an engaged part of the family or community, even though I can't see you. I mean, this is more subtle. It's something that people can do every day. And again,
I think that's great. And we call it You Matter for a reason. And because everybody, especially if you're depressed, you are wondering if you matter. You are wondering what your place is within the world and your family and everything in the community. So, everything you can do, the little reminders to let people know you matter, can really go a long way. And Carla, I love your suggestions there. The subtle suggestions really are brilliant. I have a question for you, Angela, on this one here. As a part of the Talk Saves Lives certification, I went through that course, and there was a mention that you can say the word suicide. You're not planting that word in someone's head if they're depressed. They've either thought about it or not at that point. Is there a cutoff age or with that? Or can you directly ask your elderly loved ones, are you thinking of suicide?
The data is showing that just being as direct as possible, regardless of age, is still the preferred practice. As you said, and as we say in Talk Saves Lives, you have nothing to lose by being direct. You are not going to, nobody is going to listen to that question and go, suicide. Well, I hadn't thought of that, but now that you mention it, I guess maybe I'll think about doing it.
Sure.
I mean, that's just not going to happen. You've either reached a point where you're at a suicidal crisis point, or you're not, and you're still engaging in coping strategies that are keeping you from that point. So again, I even think now they will, again, the taboo around that specific word, though, that's a good point, Mo. We've only very recently started putting that into our general lexicon. It's okay to talk about suicide openly, to ask about it openly, to offer suicide prevention programs in our schools and things. So they may still have a bit of a reaction to that word that maybe you and I wouldn't if I said, Mo, you seem really down. You're not considering you might not have such a visceral reaction to the actual term. They may have a more visceral reaction to that. Sure. That's a bad word. How could you use that word? But again, it's not ever a mistake to ask somebody directly if they are thinking about ending their life. The more direct you can be, the more direct the answer will be. Is definitely where we stand on the issue.
Okay.
And I think using that word also makes it less uncomfortable for them to say it or to admit it, because it lets them know you are comfortable. I can handle listening to this if that's what it is. Because some people don't want to burden you with that because it is so touchy. But I think it works. I think it's mutually good. It might relieve their anxiety or their reluctance to admit it because they're afraid of what it will do to you, the listener.
Correct. That's a good point. Mm-hmm.
Now, and I do mention different generations because it is something that I've noticed that the mental health topic and discussion, depression, anxiety, it seems that the generations growing up now, the kids in school, they can be open and have these discussions, but there were generations that mental health wasn't a real thing. Or mental illness wasn't a real thing, or guys can't show that emotion. Is that a problem that a lot of people may have trouble connecting with their loved ones because of that old belief?
Right, like how they used to whisper cancer, and they would never say the word. Yeah. So and now, I mean, I think it's possibly true, and maybe Carla, you can speak to this a little bit more. That the good news is we are talking about it more openly, but you may still run up against that mental block when you're speaking with an older person, that this is just something that isn't discussed in polite company, that your own mental health problems. But then again, they're talking about it with a trusted family member, hopefully, which would be the people listening here, or a trusted friend or a trusted caregiver. But I don't know if you have any other thoughts on that, like the generational difference in just admitting that you're struggling.
Oh, yeah. First of all, the generational divide is, I think, still there for the most part regarding suicide, regarding mental illness or depression in particular, because, the greatest generation, all that stuff, that was just indoctrinated and accepted. And but the other caution or the other obstacles I sometimes have seen is not only that. Some religious beliefs are such that, well, first of all, it might be you're going straight to hell if you die by suicide, so I'm not going to tell anybody, or only God can help me, so you're not going to help me with it. Nobody can help me, only God can, so just leave me alone. I mean, it's frustrating to have that articulated to you or spoken to you when you're trying to be helpful, but that can be maybe it's less of an obstacle, but the generational one is still really present, especially, and I hate to say especially with men, but I think it is true. They were raised to be the strong ones, and if you even let a tear trickle down your face, that was bad. Much less saying, yeah, I've been depressed all my life. It's really difficult.
And the statistics do bear that out. I mean, elderly men take their life at a higher rate than elderly women. So, And there are many reasons about that, right? Like not being able to admit that you need help. You know, a lot of older men really defined their worth and value by their profession, their job, their ability to be like the breadwinner for the family. And of course, they don't have a role, a real defined role anymore. If they've retired, that can be a real problem for older men. So again, maybe just also finding something actually that they can, that your loved one can do that is useful or helpful. Can they volunteer in some capacity? You know, knitting things, you know, making blankets, you know, things that can be helpful to in a volunteer way can actually make them feel so much more useful and helpful and keep them engaged and feeling important.
And even when they're living, because some people are residents of nursing homes, you know, for an indefinite length of time, and they're not going to be going out to volunteer. And they, you know, I don't know how to knit, I don't know how to crochet, but you know, I've noticed that within that particular facility, you can sort of informally or with the sort of assistance of the activity person, sort of help someone. Like, you know, we're going, you know, it's time to go down to dinner. I'll meet you at your I'll come to your room and I'll roll you in your wheelchair down, stuff like that. So they can maybe do some, it's maybe not real volunteer work, but it is demonstrating kindness on a regular basis to somebody else that might need that assistance within their facility. Would be cool. You know, that's how to manage, or that's how to look for something to do, or if it's watering the plants that the receptionist has up by the reception area, stuff like that around the facility, even to be useful and doing something purposeful in that environment.
I absolutely agree with that. Yep.
Okay. Yeah. Okay.
We have links, and I mean I can throw them up on the screen here. You can't click the screen, but I will put them in the show posting, so everybody will be able to look at this. Angela, which one is this one in particular?
So this is the Suicide Prevention Resource Center, is what you're seeing there, and that's the very specific URL, obviously, that you're showing right there. But again, if you can go to what Mo's going to post on the website there, and so you can get a clickable link. But SPRC is just sort of the root organization there, and they have all kinds of information on suicide prevention. And it's really just sort of a resource hub where you click on other links that they lead you to. And of course, they have a populations older adults page dedicated to that. So you can always just Google SPRC too. That would help.
Excellent. Excellent. And then you gave me this one as well, which is even more heavy.
Whoa.
Yeah. Okay, everybody just remember this and write it down. No, so this is actually the Department of Health. What you're looking at here is the Illinois Department of Public Health. And they have a whole PDF where they did like a 4-pager on suicide prevention in older adults. So again, you could probably just go to the Department of Public Health in Illinois and start searching around for suicide in older adults, and you'd probably land on this PDF. That's probably the best way to do it. If you're not going to go find the clickable link later. Department of Health, Illinois, suicide prevention, older adults. You'll get there.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And we thank everybody for the comments and whatnot. Laura here thanking us for shedding some light on the topic. Clinical depression. It's something that so many of us deal with here on a regular basis. She followed up, and what I thought was key here, I have self-inflicted guilt in admitting I struggle with depression, which if we do, and we are aware that we are depressed, our loved ones, especially those who are isolated right now, they may not realize how depressed they are. And that's why it's so important. And this is a common theme every week, Angela, to communicate.
Yeah, just reach out. I mean, Mo's always there for you. I don't know, if Mo's there for your grandma or grandpa. He would be there for them. I don't know if they'd particularly like to listen to Mo's show, but that's okay.
Not really my demo, but
I don't know how. It depends if they're really into hard rock or not. But but yes, reach out to me. I'm always here. And again, there, always a suicide prevention hotline. Always just a first step. If you're truly concerned about somebody in the immediate moment, call the suicide prevention hotline. That is a place to start, and they can funnel you towards other places that will give you the help that you need in the moment.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Carla, anything else you want to add before we wrap this up here?
No, I think we covered it pretty well. I think we did a
Mhm.
pretty good job.
Yeah.
In
But
only half an hour, there's obviously
Yeah,
so
sure.
many spin-offs to this conversation that we can have. Reach out to any of us at any time. We'll be more than happy to talk with you. Again, here on You Matter, we have a different theme every week. So the first week was talking about youth and teenage depression. And then last week, the seasonal affective disorders. So you can go back to those shows on demand. Angela, I believe next week's about forming a connection.
I think that's what we were going to focus on. Just how do you form connections in what has become a very virtual and not in-person type of setting? And just that there are definitely silver linings to this pandemic in the sense that we've become more technologically advanced and more creative about how we can connect with each other in meaningful ways, even if we can't be together in person. So I think that's a great opportunity for people who are viewing next week to really kind of like let us know what have they done to keep things going, their relationships going. Has anybody started a new relationship, in the pandemic? People have. I'd be interested to know how they've accomplished that and what that has looked like. So I think some really great topics, some really good questions next week, probably. So
absolutely. Carla, thank you so much for joining us this week. Appreciate your expertise and your guidance on this one.
You're welcome very much.
Thank you, Carla.
And of course, Angela, I will talk to you next week. And everybody, thank you for watching live or watching on demand. We do appreciate you.